Fantastic. I have Emma here with us. Emma, can you introduce you? Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Emma Martinga. I am a RTLB, Resource Teacher of Learning and Behaviour, not run through Look Busy. And I work in Cluster 7, which is Central Auckland. I have been an RTLB for 3 years and I have been in education for 16 years. Currently doing my grad dip in learning and behaviour. And nearly finished. Yeah, so that's me. I've got 3 kids, and kind of live and breathe our upcoming topic.
Amazing. Super cool. Thank you. So, as an RTLB, what is it about executive functioning that has caught your attention? How is it popping up in your work? Why that area of interest for you?
I would say, in essence, everything that we do as RTLB is connected to executive functioning. So if you're not familiar with the process, the Senko will make a request for support for RTLB, and they have to enter in our database what the challenges are. And when you read through the challenges, it's often task initiation, sustained focus, other things like response inhibition. So everything that comes through, I actually am going to say everything, whether it's connected to behavior or learning, or behavior and learning, it all comes back to executive functioning. And so I had a bit of a light bulb moment earlier this year, when I was asked to present at a nationwide conference with Māori kaiako across the country. And I was approached to present about executive functioning. And yeah, that kind of triggered the passion and the interest, and it's become a bit of a hyper focus for me.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's kind of how it started, but it's not new. It's just putting that in my own mind, really, and how I'm sharing the content is putting it under that umbrella of executive functioning, but it's nothing new.
Yeah. Yeah. New words, new titles for old ideas. These things keep showing up in education over time, don't they? And
Yeah.
amazing that you said that whether it's learning or behavior, these things are showing up as executive functioning challenges. So I think you said response inhibition, and we can understand that in terms of behavior really easily. Um, Impulse control as well, and task initiation. Yeah, you can see how they intersect in framing those challenges just around executive function. Amazing. So let's flip it for a minute because our organization is always on about strengths. So let's just, before we dive into some challenges, what do you see? Where do you see examples of really strong executive functioning show up? Like, what does that mean? What does that look like, do you think?
Yeah, I think often the children that I work with are neurodivergent in some way. Not always, and it's not always diagnosed, and it doesn't need to be. But part of our job is we go in and do observations. And so you get really used to spotting those traits. And but you also, being RTLB, we are super focused on strength spotting and using that. So, we go into classrooms, and yes, we often see some challenging things, but we also see really incredible brains. And so it's really important that we celebrate the leadership, or we celebrate the vision, or we celebrate how they're prepared to take risks or share their ideas or their creative thinking or so there's a lot to celebrate.
Amazing. Fantastic stuff. Excellent. And specifically in terms of some of the executive functioning challenges, you talked a little just before, but what are some of the kind of key executive functioning challenges that you see in your practice, and how do they show up?
I've printed my own resource and starred some
Amazing.
things because I was hoping you'd ask that. I'm using one of my own strategies, which is having something with me with the visuals. Um,
Excellent.
but yeah, I think a lot of our core work as RTLB is around response inhibition, um, task initiation, working memory. We're getting a few more requests for support that kind of are not specifically tagged under working memory, um, but that's what it is. Cognitive flexibility. I've had a few in the last year or two around, that quick shift that some kids are struggling with if it's raining and they can't go out for fitness that day, kind of getting their heads around that. Emotional regulation, big one. We could speak for the next 30 minutes about that alone. And task initiation. Teachers will say, I've set the activity, I've given them, the information's on the board. I feel like I've done everything, and they just sit at the table and they don't know anything. Um, so yeah, those are probably our top five that we're seeing in our work at the moment.
Amazing. Um, can you talk me through the working memory idea a little? What kind of challenges or how are you seeing that one in particular show up? That it's talked about a lot in our curriculum changes, reducing cognitive load, etc. But yeah, flesh that out for us a little bit if
Yeah,
you can.
sure. So that's working memory is your ability to hold information and use it. So often particularly at the moment, where there's a lot of content delivery, and it might be a slideshow where you're giving a lot of information at any given time, and then you're asking the children to then go and use it. But if it's not hung on anything or the information is delivered quickly, so I'm saying delivered rather than taught because I think those things are different.
Nice. Yeah.
Um, then the challenge of then using that information is really difficult for a lot of our kiddies, primary, intermediate, and secondary, because they're getting a lot of knowledge. But if it's not visually somewhere that they can refer back to, or if it's not hung on previous knowledge, or if it's not relevant, or there isn't a purpose for, a perceived purpose for the learning, then it just goes. Um, yeah, so that
And
in a
then,
nutshell.
yeah, my hunch after that, when it just goes and students can't then do the work, you said hold and use the knowledge when they can't use it. I'm imagining for some of our kids that can then show up as behavior or as shutdown, so that externalized behavior or the internalized. Is that the pattern you might be seeing as OTLB?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
is it? And that's the from my thinking as a teacher then, in terms of just digging into that working memory as an example, do we train the memory or do we train the teacher to set up the conditions or both? And
Both.
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 Fantastic. So how do we do, well, we're going to come to all of that because I
Mm,
know you've got some things tucked up in your sleeves very well. So wind back a little bit into secondary school in particular, and thinking specifically perhaps, or maybe not necessarily secondary, but I'm thinking about that transition from a primary style context, one teacher, one classroom all day, into a secondary style context. So for some schools that kicks in at year seven, and for others at year nine, where it's multiple teachers, multiple subjects across a day. Why or do you notice that the executive functioning demand changes? Uh, and just talk about that kind of change over time, I suppose,
mm.
on demand and need for executive functioning.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's massive. The switch to secondary is huge, and I'm just going through it right now with my son in year 9. Um, where it's pretty comfy. Like, yes, there are hiccups in primary school often, but it's pretty comfy in terms of the teacher managing executive functioning. Um, the teacher needs something done by Friday, and so they essentially hold your hand until it's done by Friday as a child. Um, or, the art for the calendar art is due by a certain date, so the teacher manages that. But in secondary school, there's a massive shift, and you've seen it yourself, I'm sure, between the teacher managing to the student then being asked to manage their timetable, where they have to be, and when, and what they need to bring to that class. And for my son, he lives across two houses. So is it at our house or is it his dad's house? And it's a lot. And he lost his hat and his pencil case and a Japanese workbook all within his first 3 days of school. And he hadn't really lost anything ever before. Um, yeah, it was pretty massive. And he was really tired from keeping all of that or trying to keep all of that in his head and managing that. So it's a huge change.
So that is an enormous shift. And I think that describing that shift is the in a primary setting, the teacher is doing the managing of the executive functioning. They are in charge of all of that scaffolding and hand holding. And then it seems to be an abrupt shift into it's your job now, folks.
Mm.
You're
Yeah.
in charge without a scaffold, perhaps, around
Mm.
it. Which brings me then to the work you've been doing, which is a scaffold, right? So, can you tell us then about the work you've done around uh, supporting executive functioning for teachers and for students? So, how did this start? What have you done?
Sure.
That's through.
Okay. So it came about from, and so like I said earlier about being asked to present at this conference, and really sent me on a deep dive into executive functioning, and also because it was for Māori kaiako, I was really mindful of presenting a Western concept. So I worked with a colleague, Tim, who's Māori, and we chatted with, or I've chatted with you quite a lot about this, and I've chatted with Dr. Andre McLaughlin, who is a guru on all things the brain, and kind of got a different perspective as well on executive functioning. And he also raised spoon theory. And one of Andre's main points in our conversation was around environment and how you can't, in Te Ao Māori, you cannot separate the person from their environment.
Mm,
And so the key thing before you even get into executive functioning and some and other, strategies and tactics that you can employ in your classroom or teach kids, support kids with, you have to address the environment. And I know that this is your your big thing. Um, but if if you've got limited capacity for attention, I think current research is you can attend to 7 things at any given time. And if one of them is you're cold and you're a little bit hungry and you had a fight with a friend at lunchtime, but also that the wall behind where the teacher is standing has a million things on it and there's rainbow vomit and there's, you know, um, just anchor charts for everything. Um, and they're never referred to. It's too much. So we started there in talking about the environment, and we spent quite a lot of time in the conference there. And when I talk to teachers about executive functioning, I start there. And yeah, then we got into kind of looking at capacity. So that and spoon theory comes into that in terms of how many spoons you have for the day. And often, if you're neurodivergent, you've sacrificed some spoons getting to school. Um, so we, yeah, talked about capacity, but we also talked about context. So a child's ability to focus, for example, sustained focus, a teacher may say, "Oh, they've got the attention span of a flea and they can't concentrate on anything." But actually, it's the context, and if they're really into Lego or kapa haka or something else, then they've got, an infinite amount of attention for the thing that they're interested in. So it's really important as well to consider context, and it's not fixed. Executive functioning is not a fixed way of the mind. And if you're organized in some facet and disorganized in another, that's really normal.
And context specific. And I think I love that coming from Andre as well, that we can't separate a person from their environment, from the context. So their environment in that kind of big picture, but that also that context specificity as well within an environment. Absolutely, 100%. Love that lens on it also. So keep
Mm.
telling us about you've got context next.
Yeah, and I think what evolved from my work is that executive functioning, like I said, it's not fixed. Um, all brains have parts that we're really good at and that we're nailing, whether that's an academic thing or whether that's a managing self thing. Um, but it's also something that is quite relatively easy to support, whether you support yourself and you're aware of what your own needs, as a person navigating the world, as a student navigating high school, um, and or whether it's something that the teacher can support you with. For example, like I said, I know that if you'd asked me to discuss all 9 executive functions, I would have had a brain fart. So I supported myself by printing this out before this chat. And because I know how my brain works. So I supported myself, and also you supported me by supplying some of the questions beforehand. So in tandem, we're nailing it. And that's what we want in the classroom.
Absolutely. I love that thinking that it's that in tandem. We can get this going. It's not up to the child in that, especially in that transition into high school, where we're like, okay, folks, your turn, you handle it. But it's that tandem that is still super important as teachers who are responsible for the environment, the context specificity, as well as the content and how it's delivered or taught or learnt,
Mm.
and the child can bring their best
Yeah.
to the table also.
And
Amazing.
Fano. Fano can help too. We're going to talk about my website in a minute, but there's a page there on how Fano can support and how, with my parent hat out on, I supported my son, for example. He's got a little list by his light switch in his bedroom that has all the things that he needs to remember and get done before he leaves for school, which he doesn't really refer to anymore. But at the beginning of term 1, he really needed it.
And that just speaks to that idea of it's not fixed. These
Mm,
things can change over time. So those scaffolds, when we draw back to that really core original idea of cognitive scaffolding, it is a literal, you put it up while the house is being built, and then it comes down again. And then it
mm,
goes up around the next house that needs to be built, and then it comes down again. So it's that fluidity over time because these things aren't fixed.
yeah.
Amazing. Love that.
And there's a lot of impacts, beyond environment as well, like stress. So, I imagine
Mm.
if my son was particularly stressed about something, then other things would fall down. And that's just how the brain works. And that's okay. And then we just put in those scaffolds again. It's a normal, natural way of being.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes we think about progress as being really linear and in one direction and always being in a positive direction, whereas the reality for many kids, especially neurodivergent kids, is much more up and down,
Mm,
changing over time, but not a consistent every day a little bit better that we
mm.
would like to think that progress is, and the kind of thing we hear from, self-help style things. Every day a little bit better.
Mm,
Some days not.
mm.
And that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, and that's okay. Yeah, some days I'm really organized, and some days I find it very difficult to be. And that's again a normal, natural way of being.
Absolutely. Amazing. All right. So you built a website.
I
Why?
did.
Who for? Tell us
Yeah.
about it and then let's do a little bit of a look at it.
I wasn't asked to, but I was very much driven to supply teachers with a ongoing resource that they could tap into when needed, um, that would support an understanding around executive functioning, what it is, and some really or relatively, I think, easy strategies to implement, whether that be for the whole class as a universal strategy or whether that be targeted for specific children that need a little bit of help with that, the scaffold. Um, yeah, so that's in essence is the website. And then I reached out to you and your lovely network of young champions because I also wanted to have student voice in there. Um, so do you want to tell us what you did with the young champs?
Yeah. So I will in just a sec, but I'm interested why? Why student voice? Why does that matter in
But
that context?
yeah, I think what's really important in my job as an RTLB is to understand that I'm a 38-year-old white woman, and I may be neurodivergent. I'm not diagnosed with anything. Maybe I am. I don't know. I'm open to the idea. Um, but the speaking from student to student and is massively valuable, way more valuable, I think, than anything I can offer. Um, yeah, so they needed I wanted to provide a platform for that student to student voice. Um,
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Hearing from the horse's mouth what their experience is, rather than us as educators assuming X, Y, and Z and therefore doing ABC. Let's
Mm,
listen to kids in what they say. And then for sharing their experiences, having students hear from other students is so much more powerful than hearing things from us old people. And for teachers, also just getting those insights from some other students might get them more curious about hearing from their own students. So, what I did with some of our young neurodiversity champions is just said, come chat about your executive functioning skills. And I could hear the laughter from them about that. Some of them came back with, what executive functioning skills? Mine don't exist. Lovingly, kindly, jokingly, they were saying. But they talked through some of the aspects of executive functioning that were problematic for them, that were fun for them. This was a really interesting lens on it. That, for instance, one of our champions talked about managing, goals and priorities. I can't remember the exact word. And she said, well, my brain just thinks there's 48 hours in every single day. And that means I have amazing plans and visions and actions and things I want to do. It's just that there aren't 48 hours in a day. But her brain thinking that there wasn't a problem per se for her. It was just that reality in her brain didn't meet in the middle very
mm,
well, which was amazing. Yeah, so we had some great conversations about their experiences, their strategies, their things that worked, which is great to see as part of this resource that you have created. Can I just ask before we have a little look through? You talked about universal strategy, so everyone, and then some.
mm.
Why is that universal for everyone a big deal? Why don't we just draw out some kids and do that? Why universal first?
Because why not benefit everybody?
Eh,
Yeah. In a nutshell, well, what benefits one will benefit all, and we're talking about cognitive load theory and making some things visible. If we're using our working memory to hold on to information that could just be written on the board, it's an ineffective use, in my opinion, of working memory.
hmm.
So are there some things that we are expecting our students to do? That they don't need to do. They don't need to remember all those things. Can you write it on the board? Can you provide some kind of scaffold? Is that a sentence frame, or is it, there's so many different tools that I talk about, but yeah, are there things that we can make visible so that we're not requiring so much of that memory recall that we don't need to be using?
And yeah, I like that idea of it being wasteful, almost. If we're asking kids to do things, to hold things in their memory that aren't actually that important that we could offload, it's a waste
Mm.
of that precious resource that they
Yeah.
have,
And it's a bit of a
especially.
distraction. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? Like,
yes.
again, going back to the 9 executive functions that I talk on, and some just as a disclosure, some people say there's up to 15.
Yeah.
We just landed on 9. Um, if you had asked me, to remember all 9 prior to this and have all that information at the ready, I would have been keeping that humming through this whole conversation,
Mm,
and possibly not attending as well to the questions that you're posing. So it's the same in the classroom.
yeah. Yeah. What do we want our students to focus on? And how do we get them there rather than the rest?
Mm.
Yeah. It's a very simple executive functioning lens, right? To look in on. Amazing. All right. Show us your website and what's in there.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here we go.
Fabulous.
Right, so this is it. So this is the landing page here. Um, so just a little bit of an explainer around what executive functioning is. I wanted to touch on why it's oh, I've got balloons. I don't know how I did that. Why it's more important, it gets more important in secondary and in senior primary. I also wanted to focus on, like you said earlier, bringing a strengths-based lens to the perception of executive functioning. Um, and then I have the 9, and these are links. So if you're like, oh, what on earth is working memory? You can go there. It is holding information. So really quick explanation. Every page is set out in this way. So my goal was to make it really user friendly. And luckily I've got an excellent husband who works in this area. So he talks about UX, the user experience, all the time. So I was very mindful of that. Um, and so starting with strengths, and that was really important to me. And then you'll see the video links there of your young champs sharing their lived experience. There's a couple of videos on this one. And then it starts with tier 1, which is the universal strategies. Um, Yeah, and it's got ideas for each of these and what you can do about chunking information, using repetition, provide written copies of key information, and then tier 2, and this is where you might work with a small group or an individual that you've recognized, or maybe they've self-identified as something that they need a bit more. And so this is what you could do to help those learners. I just wanted to also touch on assessments because I think we're shifting towards perhaps being a more assessment heavy lens at the moment. So I wanted to highlight how it could affect assessments, particularly, like your timed assessments. Yeah, because they can be quite stressful for a lot of kids. And some quick wins. Just do this. If everything else above this is feels like too much, just scroll down to the bottom. Quick wins. Try this tomorrow. Write all your instructions on the board. Ask a student to repeat back the instructions. Doing some color coding if that's your jam. It's not everybody's jam because teachers are human too. But if you're inclined that way, give that a go. Um,
Amazing. I love
yeah.
that those strategies are simple. That's not complicated. I have to change everything I've ever done.
Mm,
Really simple, really straightforward. And I love that, just that note about assessment impact. I agree. This is really increasingly important. And, when we think carefully about assessment, we're trying to support students to show what they know, right? That's the goal. We're trying to work out what it is they know. So to support them as much as possible to
mm,
show what they know is absolutely, it's so important for us to do as educators, to make sure they can put their best foot forward in those situations. Amazing.
yeah. The one
Yeah.
I've had a lot of feedback around is task initiation. When I talk about
Yeah.
this with teachers, I led some PD at an intermediate recently, and I talked about this website, and I shared about task initiation, and you could kind of see a lot of the teachers going, "Yep," instantly. There's a kid or five in my class that instantly pop into heads,
Yes.
and if you don't stop and really think about the barrier and the why, it can be immediately frustrating as a teacher that the child hasn't started. Um, but it's also something that is relatively quick to support with.
Mm,
If I look at down at targeted supports on the website here, sit with a student for the first 2 minutes to co-start. And I think back now, having been out of the classroom for 3 years, like, oh yeah, that would have been a way better use of time than feeling that frustration and, I just wish they'd start. I've given them everything they need to actually, oh yeah, actually, that child just needs me to sit with them for sometimes less than 2 minutes, a minute of just being like, okay, matey, what is it that you're wanting to say?
yeah.
What is it that, what's your first sentence? Let's count it on your fingers, or let's give you some topic words, or whatever it is to get them started. Um, would have been a way better use of time and energy.
And it's proactive rather than just nagging or just standing at the
Mm,
front going, right, come on, come on, come on. Everybody should have had this done, rather than that kind of quite stressed approach that we can fall back on as teachers because, teaching can be stressful. Instead,
mm,
just getting proactive and thinking, oh, if I just sat there and had a
mm,
quiet chat for a short
mm.
amount of time. It's not
Yeah.
rocket science, is not really complicated. Very, very simple things to support. I love that idea of a launch pad routine, and I can see that as a whole class venture as
Mm,
well. Talk about what that might mean or look like.
yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So,
Yeah, and that was the goal with the website, that these are all strategies that are quick to recognize as being effective. And you don't need any particular materials. It doesn't require
yeah,
much extra effort. But yeah, the idea is that they're really effective. Body doubling. We do that now in the office. My colleague who I co-presented with, Tim, will come and sit next to me and be like, "Hey, Em, can I sit with you? I just need a body double for half an hour." Oh, of course. I don't have to do anything. I just have to keep working. But that really works for him. So yeah.
amazing. And that's so tied to a whole lot of other work around the idea of co-regulation, right? That it's
Mm,
that we're responding as humans to other humans, whether we meaning to or not, so those things just happen through proximity and presence, which is so easy as
Mm.
teachers, right? It's not hard at all. All right. Can you show us then a couple of features in here about your whānau, for whānau?
Yeah, sure. And I think a lot of this content came from my lived experience as well.
Amazing.
Yeah. So helping at home, again, a little bit of a breakdown of what it is. Um, I love this message. Your teen isn't giving you a hard time, they are having a hard time because all kids want to do well. And going back to if you're familiar with Dr. Ross Green, kids do well if they want to, that switch. No, kids do well if they can and they need some supports. No child wants to fail. No child wants to, annoy their teacher to the point where they're getting sent out of the room. That's a yucky feeling. So yeah, they're not wanting to give you a hard time. They're just having a hard time. So I guess it's that change a little bit in the mentality of approaching these
Mm.
kinds of challenges. Yeah, so I just give a whole bunch of ideas here around supporting your child. So whether it be with organizing, but being mindful of not organizing their bag for them,
Mm.
um, but showing them how. And then maybe making it a routine thing. That on a Sunday night you sit there and I do this with my son. Get the sandwiches from the bottom of the bag and the screwed up bits of social studies notes and get your glue stick.
Review, reset.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
And
Ready
these
for
are
the week
great.
ahead.
So we can, share this directly with parents or as teachers in schools. We can just send some of these ideas home little bit by little bit by little bit as well
Mhm. Yeah.
to join up that loop and about working with school. Amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing. Often, Senko are in a can be in a tricky bridging situation between whānau and kaiako, where
Mm,
perhaps there's a new diagnosis, and they often, and you would have seen this, they ed psychs will provide a big list of the school should be doing X, and
mm,
so sometimes parents come in hot.
mm.
With the list of things that are suggested, and often the teacher is already doing a lot of them. Um, but yeah, it's being mindful of working with the school, um, and not, it not turning into a battle of wills or anything like that, but actually working together.
Absolutely. We know that that works. Fantastic. And classroom environment, you've got an extra bit in there.
I do. And this is everything I said before in terms of
Mm,
what's required in self-managing when you're using that secondary school model, multiple teachers, multiple subjects, increased academic demands, the social pressures that
mm,
increase when navigating high school. Um, and all of that is running alongside whole new curriculum areas. They're doing subjects that they perhaps didn't even know existed as subjects beforehand. So there's a lot, there's so much to manage. Um, but as teachers, being mindful of the environment, and of course, not everything is in your control. If the lawnmower's going past, that's out of your control. And that is part of the environment, that is considering the sensory needs of the children in your class. Noise is can be challenging, particularly there are some of our high schools that are an ILE kind of model. Um, but what is within your power to control,
mm.
doing our best effort to be mindful of creating spaces that, as best we can, fit our learners.
Amazing. Fantastic. So some tips and some strategies there.
Mhm.
Amazing. And some of that why around the load. Fantastic. Again, really simple strategies. It's not things that are hugely challenging. Uh,
I talk to teachers about the mullet.
yeah, we love a mullet
We
classroom.
love a mullet classroom. So that's kind of links here to around reducing visual clutter, but keep what matters. Um, directly behind where the teacher is, being mindful of what is distracting because your brain is naturally attracted to the novel. It's the same
Yes.
when you're doing a slideshow and you've got a GIF that's moving. You lost them on the GIF. Or on, the full-on space behind you. Or maybe you've got the strings in the classroom with lots of things hanging down, and actually, when you're at the front, the kids at the back can't see your face. Um, so yeah, I use mullet, so business at the front, party at the back.
Absolutely. Love that concept so much. Fantastic stuff. All right. And daily practice. Talk us through
Yes.
that wee bit there.
It talks about kind of your executive functioning across the day, and that also links to spoon theory. It also links to context. Um,
Yep.
but typically at the beginning of the day, you're a bit more switched on. Um, but you may need to direct your energy in a particular place. So maybe there's a landing task. Um, you might want to take a minute for those children that perhaps have challenges at home, um, to just check in with those kids and support a smoother transition into the classroom. Again, your mid-morning core learning break times. So, for example, giving a 2-minute warning before a break in preparation really supports those kids with cognitive flexibility challenges. Um, Also, to set them up for success. So, perhaps it's cold, and there are some kids, I'm also thinking primary school, that may want to chuck a jumper on, that kind of thing. I'd also talk about movement breaks, which I don't see enough of in classrooms. Um,
Simple thing to build in.
Simple things,
And
yeah.
especially in the secondary context, they don't have to be as pure a primary context where it's like, oh, we'll get up and do go
Mm,
noodle or just dance. Doesn't have to be like that. It can be very simple micro movements, chair size, pacing around the room a couple of
mm.
times. They don't have to be primary centric to be effective. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely. And it's one thing I know about myself as a worker, is that I like to change where I work. Sometimes I work in this room, sometimes I work at my desk. I'm actually very rarely at my desk. Sometimes I prefer to work in a cafe because I like ambient noise. Um, so obviously that's my privilege and my job. But in a classroom, it could be that they work at one table or desk and then they move and they sit
yeah.
somewhere else, and that just kind of refreshes your brain.
A reset. So
Yeah.
important. You've got in here also about those consistent routines for entering and leaving classrooms. I was talking with a school about exactly that recently, because what they realized is this was just specific to the PE department. They had no shared routine across all of the teachers for starting a PE lesson in the gym, right,
Mm,
which was causing issues because structurally they had three classes in the gym at the same time. And each teacher did their own routine for how they started, which was causing all sorts of confusion and challenges. So that consistent routines for starting and finishing classes can be something that is department wide or school wide or time specific, but that idea of consistent across a whole lot of things rather than what the consistency of one teacher. So go bigger, I think, when we're thinking about consistency than just the one teacher.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And consistency feels safe. If
Yes.
something's predictable, it feels safer. So yeah, really, really important to
We
be as
don't
predictable as possible.
Absolutely. And coming back to that idea of your cognitive load, when the routine is consistent, no one has to think about it anymore. So it
Mm,
reduces another piece of cognitive load. When a routine is consistent and you feel safe, then you might have more emotional space to manage tricky emotions if they are popping up somehow, somewhere as well. So there's lots of kind of flow on effects of that consistent, predictable routine. Amazing.
mm.
Afternoons. Can we just have a
Yeah.
quick look at
Well, we can
afternoons?
scroll down. Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea of executive functioning fatigue. Eh,
Yeah, and I think it's not a surprise for teachers when I talk about it. It's just, again, a different way of framing
Yeah.
what they already know.
Yeah.
So afternoons are often when behavior becomes a bit more tricky.
Yep.
They've been working really hard all day, and often also, they've had a bit of kai, had a run around. But in summer, maybe they're really hot. And so we just need to be mindful in our planning, I think, in our preparation for afternoon periods, that we're perhaps changing our expectations.
Yeah. Yep. And, in the secondary context, when our timetable is here, there, and everywhere, I'm quite sure that there's no subject that is always afternoon block. You'll always have some experience of
Mm,
late earlier in the day also, but to think about the shape of a week for a particular class might mean that you've got there about avoid introducing complex new concepts. So you might
mm,
think, right, well, that's afternoon sessions are a revisiting or a hands-on exploration of something we're already into, not
mm,
here's this big new thing, and in 3 weeks there'll be an assessment. Like that's
mm.
just not the best point in time. And as teachers, we intuitively know this, right? But bringing it up into kind of doing something about it. Super.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, and homework. Is it actually necessary? Is an excellent question that we probably don't have time to debate, but yeah.
Mm,
Excellent,
mm.
excellent question. Okay. So what is your big vision of this executive functioning support these strategies? What do you think could happen for our teachers and our students with more executive functioning support built in?
I made a little note about this question when you sent it through earlier. I'm completely oversimplifying, but if teachers did all these things, I wouldn't have a job.
Yay! Ish. But
Ish, ish.
yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
Just, yeah. How fantastic would that be that we
yeah.
have kids who are growing their executive functioning and being supported, and teachers who can create environments that naturally support executive functioning and build in strategies right through and reduce our RTLB load.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
We don't want to put them out of jobs necessarily, but
No,
let's reduce their load.
yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Amazing. All right. I will make sure that the link to that website is shared with everyone today. And all that's left is to say a huge thank you for creating this resource, all about supporting executive functioning. And I hope that our teachers jump on it, use it, go to those quick tips if you've got time for nothing else.
Mm,
Listen to the stories from kids. Ask your own students about their
yes.
experiences also and see what comes out. So, thank you so much, Emma.
You're
Super.
welcome. My pleasure.